Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
I was remembering with a little bit of a smile, I guess, of all the years that I've done talk radio, how there were so many days where I would literally go into the studio with 3 hours looming in front of me and not have a thing to talk about. Life used to be like that. Life used to be like that. There were times, and it was often in the summer. It was often August was a month. I told myself, don't come to work in August. Take your vacation in August. Nothing happens in August. Nothing ever did happen in August. So now, it's it's hard to even know, really, as usual, where to start. Oh, dang it! Thank you. All right, we got the eclipse. See, that would be something it would take. We got the eclipse today. We've got the first presidential primetime speech to the nation one can only imagine. And this is about Afghanistan. We haven't said boo about it. Has Afghanistan even been in our line of vision? Has it even been peripheral? No. Yet it's still there. And yet we're still there. And it's almost 17 years. The longest war, if that's what it is. People are dying. Longest war we've ever been in. And it appears that the president tonight is going to suggest that we put more, always hated this metaphor, boots on the ground. So we're going to have to reacquaint ourselves with Afghanistan. Meanwhile, talking about our military, what the hell is going on with our Navy? What? I don't recall a Navy destroyer, a big naval destroyer, being in a collision in the open sea. That was something, I don't remember that ever happening. And we've had 2 in what? A month? With obvious dereliction of duty, with loss of the ships, which obviously are rather pricey, with loss of life. We have no idea if, in fact, these 10 missing sailors with this latest collision, odds are if you're missing in a situation like this, you're dead. So we've lost more sailors through sheer incompetence than we have in actual warfare. What the hell is going on with our Navy? And how the hell does the president, when asked, what do you have to say about the USS McCain and the possible, the fact that a lot of injuries and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And he said, what did he say? What did he say? Some dismissive, that's too bad. I think that was it. That's too bad. This is the commander-in-chief. And then after he regales us tonight, he's going to Phoenix, even though the mayor there has said, please don't come, because there will be an opportunity now for violence wherever this guy goes. He's going to go there and hold one of his rallies, which is when the craziness happens. And he'll probably, pardon Sheriff Arpaio, Sheriff Joe, which will certainly help, again, unite the nation. You can't keep up. Bannon's gone. I don't think he was gone last time I talked to you. That's how absurd this all is. Bannon's not gone. Bannon has moved from the White House back to Breitbart, where I truly think we'll be hearing more from him and more unleashed from him. And then you had the loss of two iconic entertainers, Jerry Lewis and Dick Gregory. I don't, I'm not kidding you. I don't know where to start. And I yearn for the Augusts of old, where nothing happened. There hasn't been a day since this guy won the election that we have not been inundated and mauled sometimes by story after story. I'm saying story, reality after reality after reality coming down on our heads. So, this was odd, and this is a whole other issue, the statues. This was odd. New York Times, Gail Collins, I believe in Saturday's New York Times. I've ripped it so I can't see. I think it was Saturday. When talking about this thorny issue of which statues stand and which be taken down, and it can be a obviously slippery slope, but Gail Collins, writing a national, international column, in paragraph 3, my eyes went boom, because she says this. Pittsburgh, for instance, has a truly awful 100-year-old statue of Stephen Foster, the composer of My Old Kentucky Home, looking down in white benevolence on what was commissioned to be, and this is true, we've since learned, the commission to the sculptor to do the Foster statue literally did say, so we want Foster seated, looking down at, quote, an old darky reclining at his feet, strumming Negro airs upon an old banjo. So Gail Collins shared Pittsburgh's statue conundrum with the rest of the world. And it's interesting, of course, hearing somebody who's not one of us say, Pittsburgh, for instance, has a truly awful 100-year-old statue that plays into this issue. They're taking down Robert E. Lee. Well, hello, what about right there in Oakland, folks? You may have seen it. You may have looked kindly upon it. You might never have thought that there is something objectionable here. And then, after I read that yesterday, I'm reading the New York Times again, and the travel section, and I recommend this to you, has a huge, over 2-page lead story titled August Wilson's Pittsburgh. And there's a lot of interesting facts here that this always drives me crazy, that I did not know. Often when journalists outside of the city cover Pittsburgh, they somehow distill things in a way that we, getting news every day or living amongst it, can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing, are sort of, wow, really? That's here? Or I didn't know that? Does that happen a lot to you? Because it sure as heck does to me. But the reason that all of a sudden I'm reading this August Wilson Pittsburgh thing, after having read Gail Collins' thing about the truly awful statue in Pittsburgh, that I think most Pittsburghers have never considered truly awful. 95%. I suppose me included. I've walked by that thing and never really, I don't know, it's not like I stood and studied it, but I don't think I thought anything. White privilege not to think anything. So, in the August Wilson piece, the author, the journalist writing this, is dropping in bits from Wilson's plays. And he drops in a little snippet from the play. I think this is, I'm not sure which play. Well, it doesn't matter, maybe. But he has one of his characters say this. Everybody say I'm crazy because I'm black. Because I know the place of the black man is not at the foot of the white man's boot. I thought, I know the place of the black man is not at the foot of the white man's boot. That's Headley, the character in Seven Guitars. Okay. Now, maybe Wilson saw, I'm sure he probably did, he spent a lot of time in Oakland. Maybe he had looked at the Stephen Foster, the storied and, held in high esteem statue of, and looking at it through August Wilson's eyes, he didn't see what you see. He didn't see what I saw. He saw a black man at the foot of a white man's boot. That's right. And that says a lot where the black man is. And in fact, the black man doesn't even have shoes. He's shoeless. So, it's funny when this came, it's not funny, when the statue thing sort of came back right here, right here, because, we're thinking, we don't have any Confederate statues around here. We're Yankees. And then somebody says, what about that truly awful statue? Which most of us folk never thought of as awful at all. In fact, we thought, we got bragging rights to Stephen Foster. But there it was, and in fact, it was also a statue of a white man listening to black music with the intent of ripping it off and gaining fame and fortune, perhaps, although Foster's life is a bit of a tragedy too, but yeah, it's just classic. And so what has changed? In some ways, that statue stands as a historical reminder that the white folks ripping off black artistry is, that's just part and parcel of America. As we wrestle with all this stuff, man, the phrase "a teachable moment" also is overused. Man, if this isn't one, though, I don't know which is. It's a time when, for instance, I now get it more. I've learned from learning about why these statues were put up. I would never have known that the statue was actually commissioned to show an old darky sitting at Foster's feet, and then to see that August Wilson, who clearly knew that statue, would have one of his characters lamenting the reality of black life in America literally say the place of the black man is not at the foot of the white man's boot. But that's where he is in that statue, which we have glorified. I don't know. We're faced with some real difficult realities. And the best way to deal with them, I would think, is by trying to get oneself in as willing some kind of a state where you're willing to listen. That's all. I mean, you never learn anything if you don't listen. So be willing to listen. And it was the character speaking in one of August Wilson's plays, just one line extracted from it, that absolutely got me on the side of that statue has got to come down, because it tells anyone looking at it that a black man's place is at the boot of a white man. So what is public art about? What is the purpose? Are they works of art? Sometimes they are. Public art can be extraordinary art, but often public art serve as the first markers of the historical narrative, which is going to be pushed. Who you elevate to a pedestal is a statement. It's a political statement, and it is meant to teach, to inform. So they're instruments, these statues, of a certain political agenda and or historical narrative, right? But whatever the art, if that's the case, and all of a sudden we grow enough as a nation to recognize that those statues are part of a narrative which needs to be rectified. It's sort of like fake news. Those men on their horses in the South are not heroic, albeit the statue tells us they are. They're traitors. It's just pure and simple. They took up arms against the United States of America. And the narrative that somehow this was a glorious cause did not begin really gaining this kind of public pushback from southern states, the defeated Confederacy, until the Yankees pretty much pulled out in the 1870s after Reconstruction. And then the South started reclaiming its heritage, its story, its narrative, its intent to keep the black man at the white man's boot. That's what those statues are about. We know that now. This is the wonderful part of the teachable moment. We've learned about when these statues went up. We've even learned, and I read a fascinating piece, you can do graphs showing that when these statues started popping up, so did lynchings. So did violence against black people rise. You can see, you can put the graphs almost right over each other. They were meant to terrorize black people into submission. And they were meant to promulgate this airbrushed, romantic notion of the South. There is no doubt. You put somebody on a pedestal. We all know what that means. Oh, he put her on a pedestal. We know what that means. You put someone on a pedestal, you're saying these are people to look up to. Is that really what we want people to look up to? The people who took up arms against the United States? You know, the British did. And statues, there was a statue of King George, I believe in New York. That man had a rope put around it and was immediately pulled down. Remember how so many Americans just went wild with the Saddam Hussein statue coming down? These statues say things. And whether they stand or whether they don't, says things. Now, private art is different than public art. When art is placed in a public setting, it puts the government's imprimatur on it. It says, this, we believe this is what we are, this is who we revere, this is what we stand for. So, what are all those Confederate monuments about? They, I guess, are telling us that this is what we stand for? Treason against our own country? The willingness to die to continue slavery? And again, I think we now understand it's time for them to come off their pedestals. That's all. And inasmuch as we are learning, this is no, we're not changing history. We're not losing our history. We're correcting it. I thought the winners, whose quote is that the winners write the history? Which is true. But in this case, the losers. Because that's what the South was. That's what the Confederacy was. Losers. The winners let the losers write the story. And even began believing in it themselves, in large part. Mostly because it's totally bound up with the endemic racism that is America's original sin. Oh, maybe its second sin. I guess pretty much wiping out the Native Americans might have been the first one. Our history is not without horrific chapters. And an honorable people own their entire history. Horrific and commendable. And we've got plenty of both. We're human. I say get them down. I don't think they should be destroyed. They belong in museums. They belong with, with indications of why they were put up, really, and why they were taken down, really. The Stephen Foster thing can be picked up, not easily, and can be put in the Heinz History Center, or it can be put even in the Carnegie with clear indicators of why once it was considered okay, but we have grown. Nothing against Stephen Foster. Nothing against, I guess, the people of that time 100 years ago who were simply wanting to celebrate a native son who had a huge impact on American music. And you can't let out the fact that he pretty much ripped off a lot of black music. Put a little white twist on it. But he did some good stuff too. He took that music and appreciated it and then brought it into, I don't know. It's not for me. It's for academics to bandy this about. And today, of all days, I so miss your voice because God knows, I know you have stuff to say. Feel free to email me. I mean, that's the only thing we can do here, is if you email me. Yeah. Karen sends in the report that the Secret Service, this just came out today, the Secret Service doesn't have enough money left to actually pay the agents. This has never happened before. And the reason the Secret Service doesn't have is because they have been stretched beyond the limit by Trump and his family because of all their residences, because of all their properties, because of their gallivanting around. And in each time one of them goes anywhere, any child, they require Secret Service protection. So, let me just give you another quick quote here. It shouldn't be all this difficult. This is about statues. Memorials and monuments have a lifespan, not unlike the human body. They're symbols for certain moments, but values change, and history changes. Growing, which is what we have an opportunity to do now, growing is never easy. Growing is often painful, right? Well, from the beginning, when a baby cuts her first tooth, that hurts. It's painful. But it's an indication that she's growing. Growth is hard, but we need to do it. And the good news about all the horror that's going on is that we are in a position, we have an opportunity to grow as a people and as individuals a little bit, because we're being taught right now. I've been learning stuff left and right. Here's somebody again today. Here's a professor of history, a guy named Eric Foner. He says, when people say those statues, are about our heritage. And he says this, well, if the issue of these statues were simply heritage, then why aren't there any statues of, like, Lieutenant General James Longstreet, who was one of Robert E. Lee's most absolutely trusted and key lieutenants, who was a hero of the Confederacy? General Longstreet. Why isn't he up there? Well, you know why he isn't up there? The historian tells us. Because after the war, Longstreet decided that the black man should have the vote. He decided he had fought for the wrong side. He recanted. He endorsed black male suffrage. He commanded the police force of New Orleans, which in 1874, right about when all those statues started going up, which in 1874 took up arms against white supremacists in New Orleans. So General Longstreet doesn't have any statues in the South because General Longstreet was not just a traitor to the United States, he was a traitor to the Confederacy. And this historian goes on to say that, historians know. Everybody's talking about we have to remember. And he said forgetting. Here's what historians know. Forgetting, not remembering. Forgetting is as essential to our understanding of history as remembering it. What we choose to forget. He says, if we were really remembering our history with these statues, where are the statues in the South to the slaves? Where are the statues to the people, honoring the people who built so much of this country free of charge? Built the White House, built the U.S. Capitol, built the plantations, built the Southern economy. Where are the statues acknowledging that part of our heritage? Where are the monuments to the victims of slavery? So the exclusion, there aren't any. The exclusion of blacks from all of this statuary that we're arguing about now says a lot, doesn't it, about what those statues are about. Excluding blacks from historical recognition, this professor says, is the other side of the coin, glorifying the Confederacy. Right? Let's look not at what's there, which everybody's now freaking out about. Let's look at what's inexplicably not there. This is as one-sided a history as we have ever seen. Come on. A moment to talk about the two entertainers we lost. I just need to say this, and I also, again, am missing your voices. It appears we may actually be in a new studio next week. Let's keep our fingers crossed. I don't want to get you in, and we would have the capacity then to have the phones back. Just to get your voice in here, Chuck writes, regarding Afghanistan, Trump's doing this because someone told him he needs to do something presidential. Yeah, right. This is coming off of the only time he went to Camp David, right? He hates Camp David. First of all, there's nothing to do there. There's no golf course there. You're supposed to what? Sit contemplatively and read books and walk around in nature? I mean, sorry, ain't Donald Trump's thing. So he was up there with his, with the defense and state people trying to figure out what the hell they were going to do about the stuff going on in Asia. We got North Korea, we got China, we got, and remember the places we already are in war? All right, Afghanistan. And so they came up with some stuff, and somebody's written up a speech for him, and he'll be on teleprompter tonight. And I want you to note the difference between the telepromptered president in his speech tonight and the true president in his speech in Phoenix tomorrow night. Note the difference. Chuck goes on to say, it's also a planned distraction to get our minds off of everything else. I totally agree. As for Bannon, he may be more influential and dangerous outside the West Wing than he was on the inside. I do also think that's true. And Chuck says, yes, I remember the days when you had nothing to talk about for 3 hours and when there was no email either. Oh, man. I would walk out of the studio. And you know what? We filled those hours. I don't know what. It's sort of like survival. You just start maybe I probably started talking about the fact that I had nothing to talk about, and then one thing led to another, and before you knew it, we had a show. And sometimes it turned out to be some of the better shows. But you talk about terror? I mean, really. 3 empty hours yawning before me and not a shred of newspaper clippings, not a thought in my head, nothing going on. There were days like that. There were even weeks like that. I think someone once wrote a story about me in Pittsburgh Magazine, and I think in it there's a quote from one of my bosses saying, she always, every day, she comes in here and says, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. So that was that was just a continuing terror. Boy, no longer. Now you don't even know where to start. That's the difference. Milton says privilege is saving statues and monuments of the Confederacy because they're historic, but bulldozing Native American sacred burial sites and artifacts so we can lay a pipeline. Yeah. I saw that, Milton, someone tweeted that the other day, and it's true. That's privilege. And, those who are privileged don't recognize it. And it's not really their fault, because when you're privileged, it's your reality. I mean, yeah, it's your reality. And while you can try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, you still, in the back of your head, have that comfort of the reality that you, by nature of your skin color or your socioeconomic status or the fact that you belong to the majority religion or this or ethnic group, that you are privileged. And I've often said that if I feel somehow for good, white, heterosexual men, because they know it. And in some respects, I think they lose out on what I think a lot of minorities know, that while being in a minority is often harder, there is something wondrous about, why are blacks so proud of who they are? There's a reason for that. Why is the Jew proud? You look at all of and they have this pride thing going on now. And it's because when you prevail as a minority, in the face of all the crap coming at you from the majority, I think you become, stronger, tougher, prouder. You might want that white skin to get a better job, but you don't want the white culture. You don't want it. You want yours. I don't know. I'm babbling now. Henry writes, Lynn, it isn't just statues. For example, we have bridges named for these very same Confederates, and it ain't just Confederates. We have honored many with statues who did not deserve it. I'm reminded of the removal of the Paterno statue, which had become place of protest, too. Going forward, we must not erect statues nor rename bridges without a great deal of thought. I agree with that. Or understand their impermanence. Understand, at this place and at this time, this is what the majority of us wanted to put on a pedestal. I don't know. People like to control the narrative. So I want to tell you, as a young child, Dick Gregory was a huge figure to me. And I'm more blown away by his passing than Jerry Lewis is, but not to. I shouldn't have even said that, but that. At the time, this is the early 60s, 61, 62, comedy was really the comics were out ahead of things. So you had, why am I blanking? You had Mort Saul, you had Lenny Bruce, and you had Dick Gregory. 2 Jews and a black guy. Again, talking about pride of minorities, right? And often humor comes from minority populations because you damn well better develop a sense of humor if you're not going to be eaten up alive by reality. So Dick Gregory, he was brilliant. He was just, no one had ever seen a black guy say what he was saying. Talking to a bunch of white people. He was flat out saying it. And the white people were laughing. That was a brilliance that's hard to acknowledge. Let me find this one bit. I remember this bit. Hello. Come on, baby. Come on. Here it comes. This is, I can't obviously deliver it like he did, but he did this thing where he is sitting at a counter in a restaurant, which of course is a loaded symbol right there, right? And he let me find this thing. I want to get it right. Forgive me. I have to tell you, he lost me when he started getting into some of his conspiratorial stuff and his. But I always had respect for this man. Now, why can't I find it? This is not what I was looking for. Damn it. Can't find it. Damn it! Excuse me. So, Jerry Lewis. I've had a mixed. I've never liked the antic, crazy, buck-toothed character he played. I was always uncomfortable with that. Never particularly like his Dean Martin and his shtick. So a lot of never could stomach watching him on that telethon. I mean, he struck me as a horrible person. I couldn't help it. He struck me always as this horrible person. Now, I don't know that he was, although I saw him interviewed once, and then I thought, he is a horrible person. He was a really ingenious character, but not particularly nice human being. Is that, you think, what I'm looking for?
There are two in the paragraph there.
I think, okay, it was sort of this one. He sits down at a restaurant, and they said to him, "We don't serve colored folk here." And he said, "Well, I don't eat colored folk. Bring me some fried chicken." And then I think, according to what I'm remembering now, is he goes on. I mean, that gets a big laugh. Then he goes on, and he ends up with three menacing, KKK types standing around him while he's eating his chicken. It's a whole chicken, apparently, that's been plopped in front of him. And one of the KKK guys says to Gregory, "We're going to do to you what anything you do to that chicken, we're going to do it to you." Gregory's got a knife and a fork in his hands. So Gregory puts the knife and the fork down. He picks up the chicken, and he plants a big kiss on it. Mwah! Brilliant. Thank you. Here's the thing about Jerry Lewis. I just want to point out two things to me that resonate with me about him. I have my brother to thank for this. He was a really good actor. Now, I have trouble with the Nutty Professor and all that stuff because I just don't. I understand for the kind of genre it is, it's as good as it gets. But if you have never seen, and why am I going to blank on the film he made with Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro? The Last Comic? What's it called? It's brilliant. It is an incredible film. And it's Jerry Lewis playing like this talk show type. And he's brilliant in it. King of Comedy. Thank you, Charlie. King of Comedy. If you have not seen that, treat yourself. That's a hell of a movie. King of Comedy. The other thing I want to say is, in reading the obits, which I didn't know, he invented. Boy, did he have a hungry mind. Jesus. He invented something that is still used by directors all over the world. It's called a video assist. And when he was directing, because he directed a ton of movies, when he was directing, he wanted to see immediately what he had just shot. Now, obviously, with video cameras, you can do that, but that was not what you had then. So he invented something called video assist, in which he could immediately look at what he'd been shot. If you're doing film, you can't do that. I don't even know what the hell it was he invented. That's pretty amazing. And listen to this. For 30, 40 years, he taught at the university level film direction. Do you know who one of his students was? Professor Jerry Lewis. You know who one of his students was? Steven Spielberg. Woody Allen went to Lewis and said, "I just wrote this movie, 1969. Would you direct it, please?" And he said, "No, I don't want to." And so Woody Allen thought, oh, dang, well, I guess I'll try myself. So he made Woody Allen a director. That was Woody Allen's first take the money and run. Dick Gregory. He had like 10 children. You know that? With the same woman. Boy. And when he became an activist, he threw away his career because he felt it was frivolous compared to what was going on. He was beaten. He was beaten up in the Birmingham jail. In 1963. This guy who had just a year before been packing him in to Playboy clubs and on television and this and that and yada, 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 and making white folks laugh he was done laughing. And he went right into the fray. He was shot trying to intervene in a riot in L.A. He was beaten and all this stuff, arrested more times than you can imagine. Went on more hunger strikes than you can imagine. And he had been living the high life. He had 10 kids to support. He was making good money. He threw it away because he had a calling. And even some of the leaders of the civil rights movement told him, Dick, you are more valuable to us when you're on stage than when you're in the street. We can get people to be in the street. There's only one you. You can be on stage. And he said this, when America goes to war, she don't send comedians. Now, I think the civil rights guys were right. I think he could have been a stronger part if he had continued the humor. Because he was brilliant. But, boy, his family paid for his activism. They went from living in a nice place to really pretty much impoverished. And his son, one of his sons, who was a doctor in Washington, said this, quote, he told us 10 children that the movement came before the family. It was a hard pill to swallow. It would be. So, Dick Gregory, wow. Wow. What else we got here? Hey. How am I doing with time? I got about what? What do we got? 7. Huh? 7 minutes. Oh! And I got some emails, too. Hang on. Yeah, it isn't about statues, and in some ways the statue argument pulls you away from what we really need to talk. I'm sure Trump would rather talk about statues because he's got a bigger chance of winning that one than to talk about just the full-blown fascism that is on our streets now. That's a bigger deal. Mike says, who paid for those statues in the first place? Well, I think often taxpayers, but sometimes, I know the Stephen Foster statue was paid for by, I think, maybe a foundation or two threw in some money, and then little Pittsburgh school children brought their pennies. Yeah. So, yeah, the people often. And in each case, I don't know what, each case I'm sure is different. But if it's put in a public place, then it has the imprimatur of the government. It's the government then saying this is representative of us, of our values, of what we revere because we've put it on a pedestal. Mike says, was it just any group who could raise the money? If this is the case, no wonder rich white men got all the statues. Well, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, anyone can put up a statue, but to have the statue placed in a public setting, you have got to have the government of whatever that is, the state, if it's state property, the city property, you have to have them say, yeah, we'd love it. So, one more quickie. We're talking about teachable moments, and we've talked some about minorities and stuff. Brett Stevens, who I've mentioned a few times to you, is the Wall Street Journal, former Wall Street Journal columnist who could no longer stomach being there in the Trump era. He is a rock-ribbed conservative Republican, Brett Stevens, but he sees Trump for what Trump is, and he left. And the New York Times picked him up, and people started screaming, I'm canceling my subscription if you've got Brett Stevens. And I have shared with you some of Brett Stevens' columns since because I think he's worth listening to. I don't agree with him politically on a lot of stuff, but he's a good person. He's a good person. And he talks about, and believe me, Jewish America is talking a lot right now to each other. And Jewish America is turning more and more to the Jews who are enabling Trump and saying, what the hell are you doing? You don't see it now? Steve Mnuchin, not Steve, is that his name? The Treasury Secretary, he's a Jew. He got a letter from a bunch of his classmates at Yale, who I guess liked him a lot, and they said, what the hell are you doing? And he totally pushed back, which is amazing to me. Took Trump's side. Other Jews in his administration, I think, are getting queasy, and I think you will see some of them. Just as the first corporate exec who left him was black, I think you'll start seeing more Jews jumping ship as well. And Brett Stevens is trying to understand why they're still... How is Gary Cohn still there? How's Mnuchin still there? How can they possibly serve a guy who openly has embraced nationalism, white nationalism? And he says this, well, maybe they can just console themselves with the notion, it might even be true, that they're all that's standing between the president and another financial crisis, maybe, that they got to be there or God knows what could happen. And that's why some people are saying that's why you hope Mattis stays. That's why you hope some of these generals stay, that they at least can be, an ameliorating presence. It's amazing that we're looking to generals to stop an American president. But he says this about all the other Jews that have supported him and continue to. He says, but then there's the rest of the Jewish right. This columnist among them, and that's the first I knew he was a Jew. I didn't know he was a Jew. Last year, he says, we were given a choice between moral judgment and political opportunity, and we took the political opportunity. We held our noses and said, well, this guy will get us this guy will get us that, right? And then he talks about the argument that a lot of Jews who supported Trump used. He'd rip up the Iran deal. He'd be better for Israel. He'd this and he'd that. And, by the way, none of which he's done. None of which he's done. And it was just great to see Stevens calling these guys out. And he said, the Jewish conservatives' case against Trump, is far simpler than all the attempts to excuse him. And it goes like this. Just breathe in deeply. Breathe in deeply. It's the stink. It's the stench. It's the smell. Come on. You could smell it in the shyster methods by which Trump built his business. The unpaid bills, the endless lawsuits, the deceitful advertising, the shady business partners. Come on. You could smell it in the sort of people drawn like flies to sewage to Trump's candidacy. David Duke, Le Pen, Richard Spencer, Pat Buchanan, Steve Bannon. You could smell it in the tweets. An approving tweet of something Benito Mussolini had said. In the image of Hillary Clinton with a Star of David and a pile of cash over her head. You could smell it in the denunciations of international banks and globalism. Both of those, by the way, globalist, international banks, those are dog whistles, meaning Jews. Maybe you didn't know that. By the way, check out Breitbart News, don't. But when they have a Jew in the headline, let's say they have Mnuchin or somebody, they will put a globe before and after the Jew's name. I mean, if you're looking at it, you think, what's that globe doing there? Well, for the fascists, they know. It's saying Jew, globalist, Jew. Anyway, Stevens goes on to say, you could smell it with this. You could smell it with the rapists, the remarks. You could smell it with, obviously, Hollywood. I mean, what did anybody need to know about who you're getting in bed with when you got in bed with Trump? Stevens says, a man whose word is worthless when it comes to his legal contracts will have no compunction breaking his political promises, no matter whom his daughter married. Yeah, Jews saying, well, his grandchildren are Jewish. Jesus. Fine. Okay. I don't know what else to say. God bless us. God bless us one and all. Okay. Don't look at the sun, okay? The eclipse, that's the next big thing. Then Trump's speech, and God help us, and then I'll be back tomorrow. And don't look at the sun. Although then what the hell's the point? I don't get it. Anyway, goodbye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.